Hi there, I'm that font guy. Today I'm going to show you how to make a working conlang syllabary slash alpha syllabary and how to display it vertically. First thing to note though, I didn't want to make this video focus on creating the glyphs of the writing system itself. I think that's going to add confusion and the important details will get lost in the process. So I wanted to keep this as simple and as straightforward as possible. Instead, I'm going to focus on the methods to make it function correctly. So I'm basing my design on an existing writing system that I can use to illustrate how this is done. For this, I've selected Pagspa, which is a writing system used to write in Tibet. To begin with, I'll show you the existing system, then I'll begin to modify it to better suit a design for use with the conlang. I don't have a specific conlang in mind with this, so the end result should be pretty generic. This is Pagspa. It's designed to be written vertically, and you can see the glyphs are wider than they are tall. Pagspa is a syllabary, which means, broadly speaking, that each glyph represents a syllable, either a vowel or a consonant plus a vowel. By default, the vowel is assumed to be A. When you write a syllable that's using another vowel, you put a different glyph underneath to indicate the correct vowel. So to write KA, I just use the glyph for KA. But if I want to write KO, I use the glyph for KA, but add the glyph for O below it. I chose Pagspa for two reasons. First, I really like the way it looks, and I think it's going to make a neat conlang writing system by the time I'm done adapting it. Secondly, it's incredibly linear, which means producing the glyphs for this video is going to be a lot faster and a lot easier. So step one was to create a glyph for every key on the keyboard, and I've done that here. Then there were some digraphs that also existed, and I have added those down here. Now, of course, these are actually representing syllables, but I have to have a correspondence with the keys to begin with. We can turn them into syllables later. You will note that F and V are highlighted in light red here. That's because there's no keyboard equivalent to V in the Pagspa writing system, so I've simply duplicated F for the moment. That's something I'm going to have to deal with down the road. So what we have here is basically a one-to-one correspondence between the keys on my keyboard and the glyphs in the Pagspa writing system. But you remember there were glyphs that I had created down here that were part of Pagspa, but they're not a single key. So what I need is a way to enable us to use these glyphs as well as the ones just directly on the keyboard. So I can just type it all in. To do that, we turn to what is called Adobe OpenType Font Scripting and the Features file. Okay, this is a features file, but let me note this prefix part up here because it'll screw a lot of people up. At the start of your features file, you have to have lines like this, basically saying the language system by default is default, and the language system is Latin by default because I'm using a Latin keyboard. And my software splits that up into its own little section here. Some other software, that'll have to be at the head of the features file. Now, we're going to access these glyphs using ligatures. At the top here, you'll note that we have a lookup called no caps. And what that basically does is say, we don't have any capital letters, so if the user hits a capital letter, display the lowercase letter. That's all that does. This bit down here defines all of these additional glyphs that are in pink here. And it's just a series of substitution statements. So sub T space S by TS semicolon. That means that if I type T followed by an S on the keyboard, it will display this TS glyph on the left there. Next one, KH by a KH, it'll display the KH glyph, etc. for all of these. So I can show that to you, going back to preview here. This is T, this is S, with a space in between them so they display properly. If I type in TS, it instead substitutes the TS glyph that is right here on the left. So now all of these can be entered into the keyboard as well, and we can type anything using Pagspa as I have recreated it here. Now, you could use this as defined to write your conlang, but I think it has some problems that need to be addressed and some simplification that can be done. And I'm going to start modifying this to produce what I think is going to be a better system. This is version 2. This part here is identical to what you saw in version 1, but I've now started adding in the syllables individually. I'll show you those in a second. And I'm using diacritics to indicate the vowels. So you can see I've added all these glyphs here. That's every combination of one of the consonants in this writing system with A, E, I, O, or U added to it. And we have, where is my features? Here. We have, let me bring that up, the corresponding features entries in here to make all of those typable. So if I go, pain in the butt. If I go back to here and say G-O, actually, I'll show you all the vowels. So G, G-A looks identical, but it's actually using an identical glyph, the one that is right here. G-E has a dot above it. G-I has 2 dots above it. G-O has a, whatever that is, a retroflex, I don't know, over top of it. And G-U has a curved line. Now, the O and the U, you can see U right here. U has a little hook, so that's why I kept a little hook there. O has this vertical line with a wave in it, so that's why I used that here. I could make it look a little more like that, but there wasn't a lot of room in there. E was just a straight bar, so here it's just a straight dot. And I actually goes the other way, and I could have done the reverse of this here instead of putting 2 dots, but I chose to think of it as the Y and use the 2 ends because I want these glyphs, the diacritics here, to be distinct. When it's written in this size, it's not hard to see, but when it's written in a very small font size, I want them to be distinct. So I can now type in something like B-A, and it doesn't change in appearance, KH, and it'll give the KH glyph, I-M, and it will give you the M glyph, which is the same as the glyph for MA. That's something that I'm going to address as well. In the next version, I'm going to have a method of indicating that a consonant has no vowel. But for the moment, all of this stuff can be typed in. There's still problems to be dealt with. Oh, and I've added one other thing. If you look up here, you'll see that I've got bracket right and bracket left. I was originally going to give this system a method of having capital letters, and I now realized it would double the number of glyphs that I need, and there wouldn't be any point, but I still wanted a way to highlight a name. So in my world, one of the main cities is called Jerbesh. So if I was writing that name as a first name in text, I would hit the left bracket, which would put this symbol in here, Jerbesh, and then the left bracket, which puts that other symbol underneath it. There, you can see it a bit better. So it marks a name. It's maybe like putting something in quotes might be, or emphasis or something like that. And then you can carry on with typing other words. I haven't added any other punctuation. I will be. If you notice this little shape over here, this is just a scratch pad where I've saved some shapes that I've used in various spots, and I'll delete that before it's done. So that's stage 2. Really, all it required was creating all these additional glyphs, which was a lot of cutting and pasting and resizing and things like that, and the addition of all these features entries. That too should be totally usable at this level, but I'm going to take it further. On the consonants, there is now a little horizontal line. Now we come back here, we type in J, little line, E, the line goes away and we get the diacritic for an E, R, little line, and because there's no vowel coming after it, it's going to stay, B, little line, because all we've got right now is gerb. When I add another E, it gets rid of that line, puts that up there, and then SH. And you'll note the S has a line on it, the H does not, and it should. So I need to go add that in on the consonants below. Okay, I've deleted all the capital versions there. I haven't cleaned anything up there because that script in the features, the no caps lookup, is just going to bypass all those characters. So they need to exist in the font, but they're blank, and you're never going to see them. Now I'm going to look at what sounds are present here, obviously needed for writing Tibetan, but not necessarily needed by me for writing with a conlang. As I noted earlier, F and V are the same glyph because there is no V in Tibetan, apparently, and nothing in the writing system. Now, I had a list. Let me find it. First thing on the list is that we have C, which in the transcription on the chart, C is being used for ch. CH is being used for an emphatic ch. And don't really need that. And then there's also TSHA, which is being used for an emphatic s. So these are sounds that, if I think about it, I can probably make, but in reality, I'm not going to use them in my conlang. So what I'm going to do is swap a pile of glyphs around and probably take some out and simplify this. Now, if I get back to my list, I'll give you everything that I'm going to change. CH and TSH are similar, and they're indicating emphatic sounds. I don't need those. F and V are identical, as I said. The symbol for PH is an emphatic P. I don't need that. It doesn't seem like a sound I'm going to use in a conlang, and probably most aren't if they're English speakers, because it's not something we distinguish. C and TS, probably don't need both of those. GG. Tibetan is apparently using GG for the glottal stop. And that's strange, but I kind of like it, so I think I'm going to keep that. I always have a hard time trying to figure out what to use to indicate a glottal stop. And that's different, so I think I'll keep that. I don't see any reason to have two G's in a word otherwise. And I don't know, I like it, but I don't need it as it currently stands, so it might get changed. There is a glyph for TH, but not one for DH. So th versus the. I know that having both of those sounds in a language is pretty rare. I think it's probably pretty common amongst a lot of beginner conlangers because they're used to English and we have both sounds. I might invent a new sound for the. There is a KH, h, but no r. Now, there is an X in the alphabet up here, and I don't think I need X. Certainly, any time I did need it, I could spell it with K and S. So I may replace that entirely, just remove X off the keyboard, so to speak, and use that for GH. Ideally, I'd like to reuse glyphs if possible and just change their meaning rather than invent my own. There's enough glyphs here that I don't really want to add any more complexity, and that's a good solid symbol. I presume all of these are basically taking their origin from some form of Devanagari. It certainly looks like it. Without consulting that system to figure things out, I'm just going to willy-nilly make changes, and I will get back to you and show you what I've done with those changes when I'm done them, and that will be the next stage of this. Okay, so I have cleaned up the features file. This version of this font is done, and we can move on to the next section, which is trying to display it vertically. Okay, for the last little bit here, I'm going to show you how to write this vertically. Now, it's not very effective, I have to say. We're here in LibreOffice, and I'm going to define a table with one cell and make it fill the page, more or less. And then I'm going to switch the font size up to 48 point because the font I'm creating is pretty dense and probably won't appear well at smaller sizes. And I'll just type in test. And of course, this is in Liberation Serif font, the default that it picked. So I'm going to highlight that and go select my font, which I named Qaana for no particular reason. So it's a ways down the list here. And it shows in the font, of course. And now we see test written in that. Now, this, of course, is horizontal still, and we want it to display vertically. So what we do is right-click on the table cell, go down to Table Properties, go to Text Flow, and down here where it says Text Orientation, click on the down arrow and select Vertical Top to Bottom. And OK. And now you see it's over on the right-hand side, and it's being written vertically. Now, the cursor is at the bottom. I'm going to replace that with something written in Qaana. And some asemic text. There. Doesn't have any meaning, but that will show it off as being written vertically. And if I hit enter, it should go to the next line. And display properly like that. So it's being written vertically. It will display across multiple lines. This is probably the most effective way to do it. And it's unfortunate that we don't have a word processor that will just let you enter text that way. You have to do it inside of a text box or a table cell or something like that. But it is possible. There you go. That's the idea in a nutshell of how to create a syllabary, alpha syllabary. This is an alpha syllabary by this point, and display it vertically. I hope you enjoyed that. It was fun to make, and I'm happy to illustrate the basic concept of how you produce a syllabary, alpha syllabary, and how you display it vertically.